Hi everyone, this is Susan with the Rhinestone World. In this video, I'll show you 10 common mistakes for you to avoid as you're getting started using your Silhouette Studio software and your Cameo 3. I'm here in Silhouette Studio and I'm in Business Edition, but I want to just go over 10 things that are really common mistakes for beginners. And the first one is related to firmware and software. So keeping everything updated. There's a couple resources that you need to know about. One of them is going to the silhouetteamerica.com website, and you can take a look here at firmware updates, and you'll notice that here under Cameo 3 I can see what the version is that is the latest. And the reason that's helpful is now I can go to my Cameo and I can compare that. So I'm just going to bring over a little video for you of going to your Cameo, and this is right on your display screen. You click that little gear wheel and start scrolling through the options for your preferences, and you'll see one will pop up that says firmware. So when you click on that, it's going to show you right here which version that you have installed. So you can compare that to what the website said. In this case, my firmware is up to date because the version's matched. You also need to know that you need to keep your software updated. So back here on the main page of silhouetteamerica.com, you can click on Update Software, and same idea. You can look here at the release notes, and you can just come right over here and see the latest version in this case is 4.1.201. And then I can go over to my software and see if that matches. So if I come down here to help and look at About Silhouette, I can see 4.1.201. So this matches. So I do have the most current version running, so I'm good. And that's something that you just want to keep updated. Check it maybe once a month just to make sure that you're staying up to date. The next one that I want to talk about with you is saving your work. So it's important as you go along, especially if you have a computer that you're concerned about, that you might lose connection, or maybe you're frequently interrupted. Just always save your work. So the idea here is once you've started working on something in your design page and you've opened up one of these tabs, you can just come up to File, Save As, and you can save to your Silhouette library, but you can also save it to your hard drive on your computer, and that includes saving it onto a USB. So you could also use a USB and put it directly into your Cameo 3 and open up those files. So your files are going to be saved. The extension is .studio, and then if you're using a Cameo 3, it'll say .studio 3. So it's really important to save somewhere. A lot of people recommend saving both to your library and to your hard drive so that you have them in case your library becomes corrupt. So that's just something to keep in mind, that you should save your work. And the next one, number 3, just inserting little notes here for you. The next one is don't forget to mirror or flip your designs. So this is when you're working with HTV, and you'll get to know the differences between the materials. If you are working with heat transfer vinyl, you're going to have a shiny carrier side, and you're going to have the other side that looks more dull. I can grab a piece here for you just so you can see. The shiny side is what you want face down on your mat, and this is a more dull side. That's the side that you're actually cutting into. And keep in mind that when you go to your send panel, that there is now a little feature built in that will stop you. If you hit the send panel and you have not mirrored, it will stop you, but only if you've used one of these preloaded material settings. So if I select one that's already loaded in here and I try to send this, it's going to give me this little warning, which warns me that I did not mirror it, and it gives me the option. Would I like to go ahead and mirror it now or send it like it is? Keep in mind, if you send it mirrored from this option, it may not be the ideal placement for you on your mat. So it's probably best to go back to your design page and flip it and put it in the spot that you want to. But it's also important to notice that when you're using materials that you have entered in yourself, so for example, I have entered in here Caesar Glitter HTV. Now when I hit the send panel, if I forgot to mirror, it's not going to give me a warning. I just have to remember that. So always remember to flip your designs for HTV. If you're working with decal vinyl or wall vinyl, those are face up. Okay, so that was our number 3. Moving along and continuing with the idea of materials, this next one has to do with putting your materials in correctly and using quality materials. So the materials matter. I have a little video that I'll insert here for you about loading it on the mat correctly. So it's important to note as you're getting started that you're going to find the black arrow on the mat, and that's what you're going to feed into your cameo. So let me bring this over and just play this for you. So this is our material, and you can see there's the shiny side that's going to go face down, and you're going to put it right up in that top left corner with that big black arrow feeding into your cameo. And as far as materials go and using quality materials, I know that sometimes you might get a great deal, maybe at a yard sale or with a machine that you bought. Just keep in mind, if you don't know how old it is or where it's been stored or how it's been stored or what brand it is, you could be working with inferior products, inferior materials, and that quality is going to affect your end products. So while it might be nice to use just to practice with, it's probably not the best idea to use for important projects. So this is another little video that I'm just going to show you really quick, and this also has to do with materials. So we've got our material loading into the cameo, and it's important here that you load it correctly with your mat right up against this line. And notice this roller, when I lift it up, my material can shift, and when I put it back down and I tried to move it around, it did not move. So that's exactly what you want. That's how you know that you've loaded it correctly. And that's just a quick way of summarizing it for you. There's a lot more, obviously, that you'll get familiar with as you use your cameo more. So moving along to, let's go to number 5. We're almost halfway through already. So number 5 has to do with your cutting mat. So this is something that can go wrong for not just brand new users, but especially once you start to get comfortable and you're moving along and you're doing different things. And the reason I bring this up is because this is something that I have done myself, and that has to do with setting up your cutting mat correctly on the page setup panel. So over here in the page setup panel, there are a couple things that can go wrong. One is that if you choose no mat here for one project that you're doing, and it works great and you're done with that, and you forget that you still have no mat selected, your cameo is going to start cutting right away up here. So if you're actually using a mat but you told it that there's no mat, it's going to start cutting on your mat. So it might not be the end of the world. It might just leave some cuts in your mat, and that's not terrible, but you just don't want to continue doing that. And the other thing that you just want to keep in mind with your mat is if you are, for some reason, let's say that you have a design that is in your workspace, and you have like exactly 12 inches long of material, and you've got a design that's exactly 12 inches, but you notice that when you put it in your design page and then you go to your send panel, your machine will automatically not allow you to cut all the way exactly to the 12 inches because there's got to be some stability of your material in there. So if for some reason you were to come over here and tell it that you have, 13 inches of material and think that you're going to fool it by telling it that you have a longer mat, when actually you don't, what will happen, don't ask me how I know, is that when you get to the end of your design, your mat will start sliding around in your cutter and you'll ruin your material, because when it thinks you have a longer mat, it assumes there's going to be a certain amount of stability there. And when it's not there, it just slides around and it's going to ruin your material. So just some advice for you about that. And moving on, the next one also has to do with cutting, and this one is about your cut settings. So I mentioned earlier that your Silhouette Studio software comes with some default settings, and those are great. Just keep in mind that the material you're using might have specific cutting recommendations from the manufacturer. So take a look here at therhinestoneworld.com. We provide cut settings for the materials that we sell, including Caesar, Shemika, and FDC, and this gives you a guide for suggested cut settings. Now, it's possible that you're working with an older blade or a brand new blade and your cut settings can change. Just keep in mind that the ones that come preloaded into your list here may not work perfectly for your material. So you may want to go down here and add new material and set up your own cut settings so that your material cuts correctly. The next one has to do with this, also continuing on that same idea, and that is that you need to do your test cuts and look at those red cut lines in your send panel carefully before you go ahead and send it. So your test cuts are going to save you material, save you time, and once again I have a little video here for you just to illustrate that. And the test cut is available here on the send panel, and it's right down here where you can hit test, and what that's going to do is it's going to cut a little rounded triangle that has a pointy triangle in the middle, and it's going to allow you to see before you use your material whether your cut settings are right. So here's an example. Here is a test cut that I did, and notice that when I go to peel this back, that inner triangle just came right up. So this was not a good test cut, and you may find that you need to repeat your test cuts several times. So here's another example of this is another, as you can see, this is like the 5th time doing it here. Take a look at this one and see how that one comes up nice and clean. So that's a good test cut. So that's just an idea for you of what it should look like. And also another note about test cuts is once you've started doing test cuts on your material, notice that I have a few test cuts that took up space here. Now I can move my blade over so that I don't do the test cut in exactly the same place. I want my test cut to be right over here where my finger is. So I'm using these arrows to position my blade so that when I run that test cut, it's going to start in that spot. And when I mention those red cut lines, this is what you want to see on your material. And if for some reason you don't see cut lines here, it could be because you brought in an image that needs to be traced first and it doesn't have cut lines. Or if you have brought in an SVG file, sometimes you just need to select it over here and choose the cut action before those red cut lines will show up. But that's an important thing to look for. Just always eye that really quick and make sure you see that. The next one has to do with a different topic. So this is about using trademarked and copyrighted designs and phrases. So get familiar with the rules. You can search online for phrases and images, see if they're trademarked. I think you'll know if it's like a character from a television show, it's going to be trademarked, guarantee it. And while a lot of people feel that it's safe to use those things just for personal use, if you're making one for your child, that could be different. But if you think that you can put things out there for sale and not get caught, or just change it slightly, change a color slightly, change the eyes slightly, it's going to catch up to you. So just don't do it. Be original. Create original work. The next one, number 9, is practice. So you're only going to get better if you keep using it, and it helps to join a group, find some friends, talk a friend into getting a cameo, use it together, have a craft night, have a project night, do projects together. You have to keep using it because otherwise you end up stuck just doing some very basic things and you don't really take advantage of all the different capabilities of your machine. The last one that I'm going to hit on is about the last one, compound paths. So it's important to understand the difference between grouping and ungrouping and compound paths and releasing a compound path and welding and unwelding. So I'm just going to move over here. I have a little example for you just to give you some a basic idea. I'm just going to make this a little larger so that you can see it. And just to demonstrate for you really briefly, grouping is one thing. So right now I have all of these grouped together. Notice when I clicked ungroup, now they each have a separate box around them. So they're ungrouped. Now I can move them separately. If I group two things together with my Control G, now they just move together. I haven't changed those shapes at all. It's just about how I want to move them around. A good example of welding is when you're working with script fonts, and notice that when I go in here really close, script fonts need to be welded. So these cut lines are overlapping. When you have two shapes that are overlapping like this, if I select it and right click and weld, what it's going to do is just weld those together. So that's no longer a text box that I can change. It's now a shape that has been welded. That's different from compound paths and releasing compound paths. So just to give you an example of compound paths, I have two boxes here, and notice this one has color filled in. This one does not have color. If I put this one on top, and if I were to select both of these and right click and weld them together, now I have one. But if I were to select them both and make them a compound path, now one has been, they've been like combined into a group path. So they're combined together, they're like compressed together. And now this has like a little hole in it. So if I bring this to the front, I can see things through it. It goes all the way through. And if I were to do the same thing over here where I have 3 items together, if I select all of them and make it a compound path, now I have one big item. But if I select them again and release the compound path, notice now that it separates them into several different things. Notice how now I've got the inside of the 0, the outside of the 0, and the 1 separately. And they're all separate shapes, and they've all changed to the same color. So compound paths are very different from just grouping or welding. So that's something that you just need to understand so that you can take full advantage of all of the features in Silhouette Studio. So I hope this was helpful. If you reach a point where you're really struggling, you're starting to get some of this, but maybe you got a job to do, maybe someone ordered something and you're really struggling, keep in mind that we have one-on-one tutoring available. So this is something that you can go to our website. We'll put the link up right here, and you can have one-on-one time with a trainer who's going to talk you through your specific project and help you with exactly what you're struggling with. And you also get a recording of that so that you can review it again. So I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching.